Premature ejaculation is a pelvic floor issue. And even deeper than that, it's actually a nervous system issue. But the pelvic floor is where this becomes apparent. And it's also exactly where you can work with this issue to overcome premature ejaculation. So in this video, you're going to learn exactly how tension patterns in the pelvic floor cause premature ejaculation and what you can do to overcome this. I'm Jonathan White. I've helped thousands of men from around the world learn to master their sexual energy and manifest their ideal life. Hit subscribe to stay updated on new content like this, and make sure you get my free ejaculation control ebook through the link in the video description below to go deep into your ejaculation control mastery. In 2013, I was 24 years old, and I went on the internet. I remember this very clearly. I went on the internet and I Googled how to last longer in bed. There was a few things that popped up for me. The number one thing was to do Kegel exercises. If you're not familiar with this, this is where you squeeze the pelvic floor muscles as if you were trying to hold back urine. I also heard things like, think about something else during sex. Stop having sex, pull out the penis and squeeze it a few times. Use numbing creams, things like this. Later on, I was to find that all these things are just band-aids. None of them get to the core issue of premature ejaculation, and some of them make things even worse. It's actually discovered direct experience. I found a few books on the subject of male sexual mastery and multiple orgasms, ejaculation control, things like this. Two that come to mind were Multi-Orgasmic Man by Montauk Chia and another book called How to Make Love All Night and Drive a Woman Wild. I forget the author of this book. The common theme in both of these books was that you need to develop really strong pelvic floor muscles. And if you're not familiar, the pelvic floor is this region, basically the base of the torso, where everything sits on. Your internal organs, connects the genitals together, everything kind of sits on the pelvic floor. It's this region of tissues and muscles at the base of the body. So my first concept of ejaculation control was if your pelvic floor muscles get so strong, then you can just squeeze them so hard that the semen can't come out and you won't ejaculate. That was the logic that I learned from some of these books. And this is something people are still teaching. Like if you look up how to last longer in bed, you're gonna mostly find the same shit I found, which is do Kegel exercises, use numbing creams, blah, blah, blah. Maybe take medications, which is ridiculous. So my first mission was to make my pelvic floor as strong as possible. I was doing reps of Kegels like bodybuilders at the gym are doing reps of bench presses and squats, okay? My pelvic floor got jacked, boys. It got really strong. But never, ever did I develop the ability to absolutely overcome the ejaculatory response. Yes, I could technically hold semen in when I hit the point of no return, but I was still experiencing an ejaculatory orgasm. Fluid was still moving. Usually it was giving me a retrograde ejaculation. And what it never did for me was stop the buildup, that feeling of building up towards an ejaculation. You know what that feels like? It's a impending tension, an impending rising of sensation of ejaculation's coming at some point. And overall, I got this technique to work, squeezing the pelvic floor, because I was doing other practices. I ended up spending years studying Taoist sexual practices and Tantra, learning how to draw sexual energy up the spine to avoid ejaculating, so I got pretty good at it. But it became clear to me, first of all, how extremely common premature ejaculation is. The majority of men struggle with this, it's no joke, but also the fact that having a quote-unquote strong pelvic floor and can actually make the issue far worse. So in 2018, I had been teaching sexual kung fu for about a year, been teaching male sexual mastery practices. And I remember working with one of the first groups of men I'd worked with. You know, I taught them everything I learned, which was squeeze the pelvic floor and draw the arousal up the body. The drawing the arousal part worked great, but the squeezing the pelvic floor pattern seemed to be an issue. I remember that there was a few different men who said to me, they're like, Jonathan, I'm doing the squeezing the pelvic floor, but whenever I do that, I notice that it actually pushes me towards ejaculation, and then I ejaculate. And I'm hearing this and I'm like, okay, interesting, shit. Something's not working here. I'm not gonna teach something that does not work. So this led me to really understand, like, why would this be? One day, did an experiment in the name of science for the benefit of all future generations of men, and I masturbated. I masturbated vigorously. I went to town. I didn't just masturbate, I smasturbated, okay? And in the session, I was experimenting. I was like, okay, what happens as far as like my ability to control how close or far I feel from ejaculating if I squeeze my pelvic floor muscles? So I squeeze like I'm holding back urine, and I squeeze really hard and I'm jackhammering, and I'm realizing, yeah, I'm building up towards an ejaculation. Like if I don't do something, I'm going to ejaculate. And then I was like, what if I don't squeeze? What if I just relax completely? And all of a sudden, there's no buildup towards ejaculation. No buildup. I feel absolutely in control. And even though I'm vigorously choking my chicken, there's no impending ejaculation. I could sustain that as long as I wanted. And it felt good, felt pleasure, but no like urge to ejaculate right away. And then once again, I was like, wait, what if I squeeze now? And I squeeze, and immediately the feeling of building up towards an ejaculation. And in that moment, I was like, what? Why would anyone tell me to squeeze my pelvic floor? Who thought that this quote unquote strong pelvic floor was the key to ejaculation control? I felt like I had found the holy grail at that point. I'm like, you just relax. You just relax. Unfortunately, another trialing moment came because I remember, I was gonna have sex with my lady. And I remember being like, oh, I can't wait to keep my pelvic floor relaxed. Just go to Plowtown, baby. And I realized pretty quickly that during sex, I couldn't keep my pelvic floor relaxed. I was contracting. And I was like, damn, why is it so difficult to do this? And so this led me on a journey to discover like what's happening with the pelvic floor. Why is it so hard to keep it relaxed? And why is squeezing causing ejaculation? And what do I do about this? How do I overcome pelvic floor tension? I did some research. One of the first things I found was this guy's website, Dr. Newman K. Lin, who passed away a year and a half ago, because he was also talking about what I discovered, which was that doing Kegeling exercises strengthens your ejaculatory response. It strengthens this tension pattern in the genitals, because breaking it down on a practical level, hopefully this is practical, a little scientific. So in your pelvic floor, there's all these nerves that connect to the spine, because nerves, the spine is like the central highway for how your nervous system communicates. When you're having sex, you're becoming aroused, there's all kinds of information moving from your genitals through your spine up to your brain. What happens when you squeeze your pelvic floor during sex is that certain signals go from your pelvic floor into the lumbar 2 and 3 vertebrae. These are 2 vertebrae in your spine, 2 spinal discs. This is relevant because these specific vertebrae are strongly tied to your sympathetic nervous system. I know I'm getting fancy here, let me make it very practical, okay? The sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight response. When it's active, you feel stressed out. The body releases cortisol, so you feel your heart's pounding. It's basically like there to protect you if you're getting attacked by a wild animal. So a bear is coming at you, your sympathetic nervous system kicks on, you get a hit of cortisol and adrenaline so that you can fight the bear or run away, okay? But what's happening during sex for men who have premature ejaculation is that stress response, that the bear is, it's the sexual situation. And one thing that kicks this system online, this fight or flight response, is squeezing the pelvic floor. It sends signals through the nerves, through the certain vertebrae in your spine, through the pathway of your sympathetic nervous system, this stress response highway moving through your body. It sends a signal to your brain to say, you must ejaculate right away because we're not safe. There's a threat, so like bust this load as quick as we can before we get eaten by that bear so we can run on out of here. That's what's happening to men's bodies during sex. This is what I discovered. And at that moment, it was like, well, of course squeezing the pelvic floor is going to make me more sensitive to ejaculation. And once again, why the hell is anyone teaching this? The stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because when you're doing Kegeling exercises, quote unquote, strengthening your pelvic floor, all you're strengthening is that nervous system response, the build up towards ejaculation. And yes, you'll technically be able to like hold your semen in when you ejaculate, but you're still having an ejaculatory orgasm and the refractory period and everything. It's useless, absolutely useless. The next thing I ran into was like, okay, I understand theoretically, but why do I still have difficulty keeping my pelvic floor relaxed during sex? And I realized that I essentially had this, almost like having muscle knots in the pelvic floor. I had done so many Kegel exercises that this area was a little bit bound up. The nerves that connected to my sympathetic nervous system, my fight or flight response, were very strongly wired in. Whereas the nerves that connected to my parasympathetic nervous system were not as strong because they hadn't been used as much. The parasympathetic nervous system is the relaxation response. Rest and digest. You feel calm, feel relaxed, you're at the beach, enjoying a tall, cool glass of lemonade. Your parasympathetic nervous system is online. That's where you want to be during sex, because when you're parasympathetic, rest and digest, you will not ejaculate. Ejaculation is a function of the fight or flight response, stress response. And so the first thing I started to do to release this pelvic floor tension was reverse Kegels. Reverse Kegels are kind of the opposite of Kegels. It's actually this pressing out type of motion. I made a video called weighted reverse Kegels, which is actually one of the best exercises you can do to release these tension patterns. So check that out. I'll put a link in the description. So I'm dropping my pelvic floor diagram. And what I found was that training with reverse Kegels helped to overcome this involuntary contraction response that was building me up towards ejaculation. But even doing those, I still felt like there was a lot of tension in my pelvic floor. And that's when I discovered certain stretching exercises that you can do to release the pelvic floor tension. Now, stretching isn't maybe the most accurate description because it's doing more than just stretching. You also have to create a release, allowing the muscles to deeply relax. So it's kind of like you put your body into an elongated yoga type position, and then allow yourself to breathe deeply so that your diaphragm can move freely, and you focus on relaxing your pelvic floor muscles and tissues in that elongated position. I have a guided routine, a 12-minute pelvic floor stretch routine that I recommend you use every day, because this will, again, help you overcome this pelvic floor tension. And if you do these frequently, like at least 3 or 4 times a week, over a month or 2 months, you're gonna notice some significant improvement in pelvic floor tension, which will correlate to much better ejaculatory control. For me, it took about 2 or 3 months of consistent reverse Kegels and these pelvic floor stretching routines I'm talking about until I could like fully keep my pelvic floor relaxed during sex. And once I did that, I achieved unprecedented, elite levels of ejaculation control. Like, we're talking going to pound town and like no problem. But then the real test came when I started teaching this stuff to other men. When I was working with men and being like, okay, if you have difficulty controlling ejaculation, it's because of your pelvic floor, blah, 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 stop doing Kegels, everything I've already said. I was blown away by how effective it was for men. Across the board, men were telling me like, holy shit, like this dramatically improved my sexual stamina, made it way easier to control my ejaculation. And now I see that Kegels were making the issue worse, and keeping the pelvic floor relaxed is the key to unlimited sexual stamina. If you experience premature ejaculation, which a lot of men do, it's nothing to feel ashamed about or feel like you're cursed with, because what happened is you ingrained in a response over time. When I started paying attention to this tension versus relaxation, I realized this is how I always masturbated. I would specifically, purposefully squeeze the pelvic floor muscles when I wanted to ejaculate quicker. And it also makes the pleasure feel sharper because you're hovering on that buildup towards ejaculation. So it just became this unconscious response to my body. Through years of masturbating to porn, sitting in a chair, stiffly jerking off to porn, made my pelvic floor very tight. What you want to do is retrain in the new habit. So you start using reverse Kegels, you're doing routines to relax the pelvic floor tension, and you also want to specifically, during sexual stimulation, practicing with masturbation, self-stimulation is a great way to do this. You want to stop doing that gripping when your penis is being stimulated and really focus on retraining in a relaxation response, so that sexual stimulation actually makes you relax your pelvic floor. That will allow you to have a parasympathetic dominant relaxation response to sexual stimulation. And when you have that, you will not ejaculate, except when you choose to. So that's how fixing your pelvic floor will fix your premature ejaculation. Now I recommend that you watch my video on all the potential causes of pelvic floor tension, because there can be a lot more nuanced dynamics as far as like postural imbalances and things like that that can affect your pelvic floor. So check out that video to learn even more about what I've already been talking about here. Make sure you give this video a like and get my free ejaculation control ebook to deepen your mastery of ejaculation control. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to make more videos on this subject of rewiring and retraining the pelvic floor to overcome tension patterns. Best wishes on your journey, my friend. Take care out there.